Well, my name is William Miller, and you can read all about me. I'm a fascinating person, so I'll just give you the highlights, right? I've been doing IT financial management for the better part of 20 plus years. Please don't tell my kids how old I am. They have a suspicion, but I haven't let them in on it. I used to work for Nationwide Insurance as the IT financial management CFO. And then I started a company called Proven Optics, which delivers IT financial management functionality on the ServiceNow platform. But I wanted to spend the bulk of our time really talking about what it takes to build an IT financial management practice and be effective with it. So that's how we're going to spend the bulk of our conversation today. The first thing is we're going to talk about setting up the value conversation. So I'm going to just take a quick poll. How many of you in here have finance background or are somehow affiliated with the finance part of your organization? Okay, you see those people, right? You want to hang out with them. They know all about the money stuff, and if you don't like the money stuff, they do like the money stuff, so then they can help you with the money stuff. How many of you are in charge of IT or the ServiceNow platform at your organization, right? Finance people find them, right? They understand the technology, that part that's confusing to the finance people, the bits and bytes that make it all work, so they're good to hang out with as well. How many of you thought this was the Cher concert? Yeah, you're in the wrong spot, just so you know. So we're going to talk about the value conversation. We're going to talk about the role of IT financial management actually in the organization, and then we're going to finish up with talking about how we turn theories into practice. Rule number one, the business expects value from its IT investments. Anybody doubt that for a minute? Anybody get lost in that conversation, right? The business expects value from its IT investments. Now I wanted to let you in on a little secret. The business has no clue what value is, right? They actually don't know what they're looking for. They just know what they want. And I'm sure you've heard the conversation, I'll know it when I see it. Yeah, no you won't. It's already here and you just completely missed it. The business wants to make educated decisions on IT spending, right? That makes sense. They want to be involved in the conversation and they want to be making educated decisions about their IT investments, right? I'll let you in on another little secret. They're clueless when it comes to technology, right? Even our most sophisticated customers who are in the business are primarily trying to run the business. They don't really understand technology or they have a tangential experience, where my favorite thing in the whole world is their primary experience with technology is their iPhone, right? And what they don't understand is why iPhone applications are 99 cents and yours are $9 million. They're confused. And you have to remind them that's not enterprise IT, right? That's sitting on that iPhone. They want to make educated decisions, but they're difficult to educate. And number three, never, ever, under any circumstances, go toe-to-toe with your finance team talking about how much you're spending unless you're prepared to talk about also what you're delivering. Because the only answer to the question, how much do you cost, when you don't provide any other context, the only answer to the how much do you cost is you're too expensive. The only way to actually have a full-blown conversation about cost is to explain what you're getting for what you're selling. Make sense? Those are our three rules. Let's talk through them. The business expects value from its IT investments. Again, remember, the business doesn't know what they mean when they say value. In fact, I did a survey a while ago, and I asked people, please define value. Right? It's a nearly impossible task. Value is so difficult to put a definition around and then translate that definition into tangible things you can actually do. So I had to come up with my view of what I think value is, and this is my definition that I give to value. How I feel about what I paid for what I got. How I feel about what I paid for what I got.
Now, I can tell you right now, you can explain to the business and your finance team can tell you exactly how much they paid. That piece is easy. It's done every day. What I got depends. Sometimes IT is really good at explaining, here's what you get from us, and they go through a list of services or applications or capabilities that they're delivering. Sometimes they're not so good at it. Sometimes IT gets into some technobabble because they get nervous and they start talking about CICS transactions on the mainframe. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Or as I got in the conversation yesterday with a customer, the optical cards that slot into the chassis. What? Right? So explaining what you got becomes a critical element within the process of doing IT value. The sticky one is that one at the top. How I feel. I don't know, how do you feel? Take a tip from smart marketers. We tell people how they feel when we tell them what they paid and what they got. Don't wait for them to figure it out because they don't know. When I was doing this, I started every conversation with, you should feel fantastic because you got one heck of a deal on some very specialized services that your business relies on every day to operate. And they were delivered flawlessly. Doesn't that feel great? Oh yeah, that feels great. That's a real value, isn't it? Sure it is. How much did I pay? Right? The value proposition in all of this is extremely complicated and extremely difficult. But because we are part of this organization trying to explain technology, which is not always well understood by the consumers, we have to take the extra step and fill in the gaps. Now, finance and IT, oil and water. I don't know what it is, oil and water, right? It's very hard for technical people who are engineers to understand the elegance and beauty of a spreadsheet. I mean, it's just gorgeous when you can get those numbers flowing, right? And your little macros executing, and the forecast pops out, and you're like, this is amazing, right? Equally, it's difficult for the finance team to understand the thrill of a well-executed code string that took hours to just make perfect, and when I click enter, it executed flawlessly, like there were little parades and little firecrackers going off because it was beautiful. But they're the same thing, guys. They're literally the same thing. But having that conversation with your IT department and your finance department, IT, same responsibility. You got to tell finance how they feel. You should feel great I spent more than you gave me. You really should, because we got so much value for it, right? How I feel about what I paid for what I got. Every business wants to make educated decisions about their IT investment. Educated decisions. Now the problem is, for most of us, when we talk about IT and technology decisions, we're talking about it in technical terms. And if we're talking about it in technical terms, to the non-technical part of our business, they're not keeping up. By the way, we got any CIOs in the room? Because I'm going to talk about you. All right, close your ears. Right? We got any other business executives in the room? Non-CIOs, finance, CF? We got any CFOs who bothered to show up? No, not really. Okay. Executives typically nod their head and say yes when they mean, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Right? So you're explaining what's going on, and they're like, oh yeah, They'll know what the hell you're talking about. That's what that means next time you see that head bobbing up and down. So you should always think about things in terms of how can I translate this from technology or a technical piece into something that's relevant to the business? How can I meet them where they sit? And the easiest way to do that is to understand how business decisions get made. And there's two frameworks we're going to talk about for decision making in technology. The first one doesn't apply to just technology. It literally works everywhere in business. It also works in your own private life, which is fantastic, which means we can all understand it. Every decision is a trade-off between price, performance, and risk. When I need to make a business decision about where to invest in technology, the technology department should be coming forward with option A, option B. Here's the price, here's the performance, here's the risk. The reality is, things that cost less, perform less, and come with higher risk. If there was anything that didn't do that, we would have already bought it, right? We would have bought it the day it showed up. We would have bought 4 of them, right? By and large, the reality is things that cost less, perform less, and have a higher risk. At the end of the day, IT can't make that decision for the business. We can make a recommendation. But you, the business, go back to value, how I feel about what I paid for what I got. You have to make the call. Is the price the most important on this axis? Is risk the most important on this axis? Or is performance? And those are the choices you have to make. Presenting that information that way gives them a clear sense of what they need to do with that process. I'm going to give you an example of where this showed up. And anybody here from the Federal Reserve? Because I'm going to talk about you. Good. Don't tell them I said this. So I was doing some work with the Federal Reserve, and they were talking about how they could bring down the cost of their critical environments. And so we're looking at some of the applications they have in their critical environments, and I'm like, what is that? Oh, that's the cafeteria menu. Why is your cafeteria menu set up in a clustered, hot, redundant environment? Just out of curiosity, right? And so nobody could answer this question until we kind of probed. We actually ended up in front of the CIO, and I'm like, come on, there's a story here. He's like, I'm sick and tired of getting the call all the time when the cafeteria menu's not available online. People call their boss, who calls their boss, who calls their boss, who calls the CEO, who calls me and says, why is the cafeteria menu down? So guess what we did? We made it so the cafeteria menu never went down. And it only cost $15,000 a month. There's nobody in technology who can decide, is that the right price for that performance? The risk of having a phone call from my boss's boss? I'm like, the right thing to do is to go back to the Fed chair and say, brother, listen, if the next time you get a call, the cafeteria menu's down, tell people, walk your ass down to the cafeteria and look at the menu. Because that's a hell of a lot cheaper than $15,000 a month, right? So this is the important part of the conversation. At the end of the day, IT can't decide for the business what is the right risk to accept, what is the right performance to expect. All we can say is here are the options. So you, business, get to make a decision. Now, by the way, if you didn't get the memo, you have to have them sign in paper, right? I understand the choices I have made and the potential impact of the outcome of the fact that I made an educated guess even though I'm uneducated in this. Because at the end of the day, when the performance goes down or the actual leak occurs, guess whose fault it is? It's still your fault. And that's the joy of being in IT, right? You can do the best you can do to set it up, but it's still your fault. Fantastic. The other piece of making good decisions and kind of driving that decision element is something that really helps to put the structure around data and how we present information back to the organization. So this chart is the pyramid of expectations, and I call it the pyramid of expectations because this is what everybody expects, insight, but rarely do we give them that. So let me give the example. Data is all that little bits and bytes of stuff that's floating all over your organizations, exabytes, terabytes, petabytes, you got them, stacked up all over the place. Data has never been a problem in any organization I've ever been in, lots and lots of data. When we take data elements and we put them together, 2, 3, or 4 data elements, we get what I call information. And so the best way I can describe this is in a non-technical way. If I said to you 1 mile, no, I lied, 1 gallon of gas and 20 miles. Those are 2 data points. And if I put them together, you would say 20 miles to the gallon. Everybody familiar? You've heard that before? That's a nice little ratio. That's a benchmark, right? By the way, I don't know if anybody in here is a benchmarking person or owns a benchmarking company. Benchmarking sucks, right? Benchmarking's challenging for organizations because at the end of the day, you could say that's 20 miles to the gallon and that's 35 miles to the gallon, therefore that one's better. How did you know that? That relevance of that benchmark is completely, it's preposterous. It's so impossible. And the reason is there's no 2 companies that are exactly alike. So if I tell you we've got some information, 20 miles to the gallon, unfortunately this is where so many organizations stop. Finance stops here, IT stops here, and we walk into the committee or we walk in front of the executive team and we say, hey, 20 miles to the gallon, 40 miles to the gallon. Which do you want? I love it when I hear organizations say, we're going to be a data-driven organization. You are. You're getting rid of all the people? Because people are not data-driven decision makers. Nobody who's a human makes a decision on data. It's impossible for us. We don't like to, for one, but we also can't figure it out. Human beings make decisions on context. Everything we think about in terms of what's right, what's wrong, do this, do that, has a context. Data's an input, maybe, but at the end of the day, it's all about context. So 20 miles to the gallon, 40 miles to the gallon, we stop there with our information and we say, make a decision. Well, if we can't make a decision with information, we have to make it with context. I, as a human being, I'm going to put my own context on what you just told me. And if I am a eco-friendly, environment, tree-hugging savior of the planet, I'm going to tell you 40 miles to the gallon because that's the right choice. But if I like off-roading in a big truck, I'm going to tell you right now, ain't no such thing as being able to off-road at 40 miles to the gallon, so it's going to be 20 miles to the gallon. By the way, neither one of those contexts is relevant to the decision. So let me give you some context. Let's expand that conversation. 20 miles to the gallon, 40 miles to the gallon. 20 miles to the gallon is a big pickup truck. I told you that already. The 40 miles to the gallon is a two-door hatchback. Here's the context. You have 300 boxes to move and 1 hour to move them. Which one do you want? You've got to have the context. Now, can you move 300 boxes in an hour with a two-door hatchback? Yes, you just need 12 of them. Right? Who's my cybersecurity folk? Right? And I got 12 drivers on the road. Somebody's going to get lost. Somebody's going to get in an accident. Right? If you're a really smart cybersecurity person, you're like, yeah, you got all those boxes in one truck. You're screwed. Right? So that guy wasn't here today. Right? So there's a risk associated with either one of those decisions. By the way, the 20 miles to the gallon, 40 miles to the gallon, less important in this context. If you are still an environmentally conscious, eco-friendly person, does it not make sense that your carbon footprint is smaller with one truck moving 300 boxes for 1 hour than 12 hatchbacks doing it? Absolutely. So even within that framework, we can see that a completely opposite decision, better decision, can be reached just by applying the context. And the last leg of this whole thing is insight. Insight doesn't belong anywhere, doesn't exist anywhere except in the human mind. All this stuff about artificial intelligence, right, is coming on board. It's exciting, it's fun. There is no insight in artificial intelligence. All artificial intelligence can do is take data, create information, provide context. You still need a human being to give the insight. So in the story we were just telling, what is that insight in the last thing? Why are we moving 300 boxes in an hour? And by the way, that's the number one question businesses don't ask themselves. Why are we doing this? We talk about the options for doing it. We talk about the methods for doing it. We talk about the cost of doing it. But very rarely do we step back and say, why are we doing this? And that's probably the most critical conversation that we need to have. Pyramid of expectations is about taking data, aggregating it into bits of information, coding that information into categories of context, and providing that context so that insightful people can make insightful decisions with what we should be doing with our money when it comes to technology. Never talk about IT spending without talking about what IT delivers. I'm going to give you a little tidbit, IT, next time finance comes to you and says you overspent your budget. We're special. You need to say that, we're special. And when they're like, what do you mean you're special? I don't understand how you could be special. What is the purpose of technology in an organization? What does it do? It enables the business. Most technology organizations, if the business went out of business, would they go find another business to support? No. We go out of business with you, right? We are not something different. We are part of the fabric. We're part of the fiber of what goes on. But what ultimately is technology doing for the organization? We're automating business process. Not our business process, business process. We're automating your business process. when we automate the business and their process, who benefits? Not IT, the business. When you automate a business process, what does that mean? It means you need fewer people to execute whatever it is that your organization's delivering to the end consumer, whoever it is, right? You need fewer people, you need less time, you need less physical footprint, whatever the case may be. All that benefit is accruing on the business side of the equation. So when the finance team comes and says you overspent your budget, say, yeah, brother, I did, and I enabled so much benefit on the business side, go collect from them. All the benefit sits over there. We accrue the cost on the IT side of the equation, but all the benefit sits over there. And by the way, I don't know any organization that isn't lousy at collecting this. They are lousy at doing it. We just enabled, the business comes in bitching, I need a process, I need to automate, buy this application, blah, blah, blah. They get it all set up. It's running like, this is brilliant. You guys are amazing. We love you. And that $1 million or $3 million or $30 million, or in the case of SAP, $600 million that you spent in getting that out the door and automating all those processes, they went to finance and said, I know we have 400 people, and this was automating like what 200 people were doing, but we still need 400 people because there's lots of fun stuff with it 400 people could do. And I don't really know how to get rid of people because it was part of Joe and part of Sally and part of Sam and part of Tony. It wasn't really just one person. And so since it was in my budget last year, it should be in my budget this year, and you should go screw IT. And by the way, finance guys like, that makes a lot of sense. I can see how that works. So tracking that benefit and who's receiving the benefit is what is so critical in this process about never ever talking about IT spend without talking about what IT delivers and who's benefiting from it. Because at the end of the day, that's our whole purpose in life. That's why we exist. And if that purpose no longer existed, we wouldn't exist. It's a pretty straightforward equation. What is the IT financial management role in effective IT management? I don't care what business you speak, language-wise. I grew up in insurance. We talked about claims and agents and agency desks and customer service. I don't care what you do. There's a language of the business that you're supporting. And if you work in technology and you're even quasi-good at what you do, there's a language of technology. You're talking about servers or cloud resources or human resources or project management, or cybersecurity. You are talking in the language of technology. Those are two different languages, completely different languages. As if it were English and some other language. They're completely different languages. There is a universal translator, and that's the $sign. Everybody speaks money. Everybody speaks money. And as the universal translator, it is very important that we tell that story effectively through the process. And so these are just some examples of what goes on in organizations. We're having a funding challenge. We're having operational delivery challenges, or we need to defend our budget. We're being asked to cut costs or to explain why we spend money the way that we do. And within each one of those, there are methodologies with which we can use to answer those questions. When it comes to funding challenges, we need to communicate the IT story better. We need to explain what we do for the business, how it adds value, how they feel about what they paid, because this is what we delivered. Telling that IT story effectively and efficiently, those benefits are accruing elsewhere. I'm just footing the bill. Prioritizing IT spending, helping to make sure that we spend our money on the right things at the right time. What's fascinating to me is when there's ever a cyber event, cybersecurity spending jumps, right? And we're writing a lot of checks. I'm just waiting for the day when they come back knocking on the door going, what did you spend all that money on, right? I have a great answer for that. We spent all that money on nothing. Isn't that awesome? Nothing happened. That's what we spent the money on, right? They're going to be baffled. Finance is going to be like, oh, what's the ROI on nothing? Yeah. Let me help you calculate that one. Sometimes we have to modernize IT. Anybody dragging around a mainframe? Nobody? Oh, there's one. All right, there's always one boat anchor in the crowd, right? Legacy applications, on-premise solutions, old stacks that we have set up in infrastructure, trying to migrate that crap to the cloud. Good luck on that, right? Modernizing IT is a huge challenge. You got to spend money to do it. It doesn't just happen. And so we have a lot of organizations that are really perpetuating that pain until the current CEO retires. He still wants his budget, his bonus, right? So we're not going to spend it on that. So at the end of the day, being able to tell that story effectively and efficiently is what this process is all about. This is the sell part. Hey, we got some cool clients. You should talk to them. They love us. I hope so. Nobody said anything different yet. We have a blueprint, a methodology, a way to get to where you want to go. You use a cost model. You do budgeting and forecasting. You have analytics. At the end of the day, your goal is to create a comprehensive end-to-end methodology that links IT doing what it does every day to a budget that it spends every day to a set of outcomes that deliver value to the organization. And by the way, if you find stuff you're doing that sucks and you're not good at it, stop doing it. Admit it. We shouldn't be doing that. We're not good at it. Give it to somebody who is good at it. How do you turn this theory into practice? So the first thing is you need to build a cost model. Service-based costing, service-based delivery is the key to this conversation. Nobody understands the technology you're delivering. What they understand is how they're consuming it. So you want a cost model that gets you to service-based. You have employee productivity services. There are things like email and chat on Teams. Okay, maybe it's not productivity, but you know what I'm talking about. It's connectivity. Sometimes it's not that productive, right? But they get a laptop and they get whatever software they needed loaded on that laptop, and they have a help desk and they have access management. We are providing a set of outcomes that enable our employees to come to work and do what they need to do seamlessly and efficiently. We don't deliver email. We don't deliver that. We deliver productivity. Email's a component. It's one of the things that people get used. So if you think about how that model's structured, it's really about communicating that story in a very effective way. Models are not hard to build. You really only need financial data, some operational data, some allocation metrics, a good attitude, a strong cup of coffee, and you can have a model. And by the way, models can be simple. In fact, the simpler they are, the more people believe them, right? Keeping it simple is always critical in that process. But getting away from the technical language and getting into how that actually provides value to the organization is the key to that. The other thing we can get out of this, anybody have the total cost of ownership conversation going on? TCO? Yeah? A couple of you? Not many. Some of you aren't like, nah, I don't know what that is. TCO is when we want to know how much things cost, total cost of that idea, particularly behind like an application TCO, where we're looking at the infrastructure cost as well as the labor cost to deliver and maintain an application, and that's outside the project cost, like things that change or enhance an application. That core piece, the greatest thing you can do in the whole wide world is to take that total cost and divide it by the number of users and tell them that application costs $500 a user, that one costs $17,000 per user. Let the business understand the cost per user. And them justify. You don't justify the cost. I don't know. It's your application. You tell me if it's worth $17,000 a user. I don't know the answer. By the way, if it's a trading desk at J.P. Morgan Chase that runs $30 billion annually of profit, $17,000 a user may not be enough, right? What is it being used for? That's the conversation you want to get to. Forecasting, right? Budgeting's one thing, but being predictive in what you're going to cost next week, next quarter, next year is extremely critical. And the more heads up you can give to the business where your costs are heading and why, the easier it is to sell them on that budget. IT, raise your hand if you think your business will depend on IT less than it does today in 5 years. Okay, great. Raise your hand, finance, if you think your organization is going to be spending less on IT than it is today in 5 years. Good, because anybody who raised their hand, they're out of business in 5 years, you should short that stock. Dependency going up, cost going up. This is not a game. This is just flat out common sense. So let's get on the front end, IT. Let's explain what's driving the cost. Help them get used to it. Most of the business and finance guys need about 6 months to adjust to a change, right? Let them know now. Budget's going up next year, here's why. And if you don't want it to go up, let's talk about what trade-offs you want to make. Remember, price, performance, risk. What do you want to trade off in that process? And the last thing of it is being able to back to the consuming units what they're using. And that's where the service-based pricing and costing comes from, because it enables us to actually show back to a business unit all the value they're getting for their IT dollars, not how much they're spending. This is not a spend, this is a value. This is the value you get from us on a daily basis. So we're on ServiceNow. We are a fully functional native on the platform. Our name is Proven Optics. We have a booth down at 203. We'd be happy to chat you up, tell you about what we do, get you a quote, sell you some software. That's our job in life. But also set you up for a value conversation within your organization. Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope it was useful for you guys. Enjoy the conference.